we're going to move on to the next story. We're rocking and rolling and rocking and rolling. Joe Biden is in South Carolina, and he is trying to win over Black voters in Columbia, South Carolina. He's been visiting Black churches. It's really interesting to me that they spend so much time, Democrat politicians, focusing on South Carolina, a state that is essentially red. I lived in South Carolina. Let's be clear. It's not like Joe Biden is going to win the state of South Carolina in the general election. We know it is going to go towards the Republican nominee. But they spend a lot of time there. And considering the fact that the DNC is saying there's no real primary in reference to Joe Biden, meaning that his challengers will not receive any delegates, I don't understand what this is all for. I just really don't. I could understand if they were acknowledging the other challengers and we had debates in the Democratic primary. I could get all that. But essentially, Joe Biden is out there trying to get Black voters in South Carolina in a state that is going to be red. Now, this is a Democrat Party playbook to get the Black church. You don't have to believe me. Give a shout out to Case Study QB for actually this clip here, which features Bakari Sellers explaining to you just how they operate and how they pretty much assume that the Black church is going to be their key to winning the Black vote. Listen to this.
Can I comment on the UAW piece? I thought the most noteworthy thing that happened was he got the endorsement, and then the president of UAW went on TV and said, just to be clear, a majority of my members are going to vote for Donald Trump. And I think that's the problem for President Biden in this race right now. The institutional elites in many institutions, they do support Joe Biden. But the people right now are very, very nervous about his leadership and his ability to do the job. And for him to make that comment shortly after that, I mean, it took all the air out of the balloon.
I think it
Notice what he just said, institutional elites. He separated institutional elites from the actual people. He said the institutional elites, but the people. So that right there lets you know that he knows that the majority of the people are not a part of that institution.
It piggybacks what you were saying as well, that you get the endorsement. Now you have to go into the union halls. And what Donald Trump is doing, what Joe Biden is doing and Kamala Harris are both doing is they're penetrating those areas now. I mean, he's literally in South Carolina as we speak. He was in South Carolina last night. He went to beauty salons. He's actually on the ground doing things that he wasn't able to do in 2020, which is, you're correct. Once you get the institution, like once you get the Black pastor, that's the grass top. Now you got.
Let's go back, folks, because this is a very revealing moment. And pay attention to the words, the vocabulary that he chooses to use. Listen to this.
What you were saying as well, that you get the endorsement. Now you have to go into the union halls. And what Donald Trump is doing, what Joe Biden is doing and Kamala Harris are both doing is they're penetrating those areas now.
They're penetrating those areas. I probably would have used a different word. I'm just kidding. I probably would have used a different word, but listen to this.
I mean, he's literally in South Carolina as we speak. He was in South Carolina last night. He went to beauty salons. He's actually on the ground doing things that he wasn't able to do in 2020.
Beauty salons.
Which is, you're correct. Once you get the institution, like once you get the Black pastor, that's the grass top. Now you got.
Once you get the Black pastor. Here's Bakari Sellers giving away the game, letting you know that this is what they count on. This is what they count on, getting the Black pastor. This is another reason why a lot of younger Black voters don't actually vote. Because a lot of young Black voters are not in the Black church. Mostly when you go to the Black church, who do you see? Older Black people, grandma, mom, and maybe mom's kids that she brought to church with her that don't have a say-so on whether or not they can go to church. But a lot of us, like millennial, Gen Z, Black peeps, you don't see as many of us in the Black church. Bakari Sellers, a Black man, sitting up here and saying this with no shame whatsoever, and says, once you get the Black pastor, there you go. Tokenism. And he has no shame. No shame saying it. Listen to the way the Democratic Party is operating to recruit your people. And he's just like, yeah, just get the black pastor and then, forget everybody else. Black church, beauty salons, forget everybody else in the community. He should be ashamed of himself.
Got to get the people in the pews. You got to get the women who wear the big hats. When you hug them, they smell like Chanel No. 5 all day long, or they use a full stick of butter in their sweet potato pies. So you actually have to go out. And
the coonery. Like, are you guys hearing this? The big lady, the lady with the big hat. The lady with the big hat smells like Chanel No. 5, makes the sweet potato pies. What kind of Uncle Tom? Listen.
Able to do in 2020, which is, you're correct. Once you get the institution, like once you get the black pastor, that's the grass top. Now you got to get the people in the pews. You got to get the women who wear the big hats. When you hug them, they smell like Chanel No. 5 all day long, or they use a full stick of butter in their sweet potato pies. So you actually have to go out and visit with those people. And that's what Joe Biden's doing. He's doing it in South Carolina with the black vote. He has to do it in Detroit and other places.
He's got to do it in the Union House. I've had many conversations with the president of the UAW. And I'll tell you something, that endorsement was earned.
It kind of ticks me off the way that he described the black women in the church. It made me feel some kind of way. Yes, there are a lot of times the older black women may wear the big hat, but then he had to throw in, put a whole stick of butter in the sweet potato pie and smell like Chanel No. 5. The coonery of it all. And of course, they had a black guy do it. Bakari Sellers, the sellout, okay? I never understood why Nina Turner had this guy be a part of her campaign. The same guy who sat there smearing Bernie Sanders' campaign, and Nina Turner was working with the Bernie campaign. Then you pick this guy and make him a part of your campaign. This guy is the sellout's sellout. I don't give a damn how long you lived in the South, Bakari. You're the sellout. Damn shame.
And that man, Sean Fain, is a competitive man. He has put his name on delivering those union voters. That's one of the biggest wins President Biden's got.
And it may have been, but I think what you've seen over the last few weeks is a change and a difference here. You've seen on the political battlefield, Donald Trump solidify his base, winning Republicans over and over, both in Iowa and New Hampshire, and as we head to South Carolina and Nevada and beyond. What you've seen with the president is he's made some decisions, whether it's working with his EPA to ban, gas-driven cars. That's wholly unpopular with the public, but popular with his base. What we saw on Friday with, banning or a moratorium on exporting of natural gas, he's actually having to play to his base to a degree that's really uncomfortable at this stage of a campaign. So it's going to be a balance to see how that continues as Donald Trump racks up more and more, not just support from endorsements, but more and more support from voters across the country.
So let me tell you what's happening, folks. In reference to Biden and the black church, it appears black pastors are now starting to put some type of pressure on Joe Biden. I don't usually shout out the New York Times, but I actually am going to shout them out for covering this, because this is very interesting. Black pastors pressure Biden to call for a ceasefire in Gaza. Dun, dun, dun. Let's get into it. As the Israel-Hamas war enters its 4th month, a coalition of black faith leaders is pressuring the Biden administration to push for a ceasefire, a campaign spurred in part by their parishioners who are increasingly distressed by the suffering of Palestinians and critical of the president's response to it. Would Nancy Pelosi say that these black pastors are paid by Russia? Is she going to tell the black pastors to go back to China? Let's continue. More than 1,000 black pastors representing hundreds of thousands of congregants nationwide have issued the demand in sit-down meetings with White House officials. And through open letters and advertisements, ministers have made a moral case for President Biden and his administration to press Israel to stop its offensive operations in Gaza, which have killed thousands of civilians. They are also calling for the release of hostages held by Hamas and an end to Israel's ding, 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 occupation in the West Bank. See this, guys? People waking up. The effort at The effort at persuasion also carries a political warning, detailed in interviews with a dozen Black faith leaders and their allies. Many of their parishioners, these pastors said, are so dismayed by the president's posture towards the war that their support for his re-election bid could be imperiled. Black faith leaders are extremely disappointed in the Biden administration on this issue. This is coming from Reverend Timothy McDonald, the senior pastor of First Iconium Baptist Church in Atlanta, which boasts more than 1,500 members. He was one of the first pastors of more than 200 Black clergy members in Georgia, a key swing state, to sign an open letter calling for a ceasefire. Woo! We are afraid, Mr. McDonald said, and we've talked about it. It's going to be very hard to persuade our people to go back to the polls and vote for Biden. Oh, ladies and gentlemen. Because you see, you have to remember Martin Luther King and a lot of the Black church that marched with Dr. King and were part of the civil rights movement. Remember, I told you before, a lot of these Black revolutionaries that we've had in this country stood in solidarity with Palestine. Malcolm X was another one. If you go to Palestine, you'll actually see, I think it's in Ramallah. If you go to Ramallah, there's a statue of Nelson Mandela. So you see, it's kind of like the way that Israel is treating the Palestinians. I see them, it's like they're treating them like they're the Black people of Israel. That's how I feel like they're treating them. Any cracks in the ordinarily rock solid foundation of Black support for Mr. Biden and for Democrats nationally could be of enormous significance in November. And this is usually what has been keeping the Democratic Party alive. The Black church, the Black pastor. Is not me. Is not a lot of people like me. This is where they would go to. They'll go to the churches, or as Bakari said, they'll go to the beauty salons. I'm not in the beauty salon. I go get my hair done by a woman in Cambridge once every 3 months. But typically you usually see older women would go into the beauty salons a lot more often, stuff like that. That's where they're going. That's who they're trying to recruit. And that's who they chose to focus on. Not realizing that as that generation particularly gets older, the younger Black voters that they chose to ignore are also getting older. And now it's getting to the point where they realize they may have to start counting on our vote as well. And we grew up during a different time. And we are less likely to buy into the two-party system. And we are less likely to put up with bullshit. It's just the reality of the situation. They have ignored us for so long. The intense feeling on the war in Gaza is among Murad unexpected ways that the war has scrambled U.S. politics. And it comes as Mr. Biden is already facing signs of waning enthusiasm among Black voters who have for generations been the Democrats' most loyal voting base. Let's highlight loyal. Dogs are loyal. And dogs are loyal. They do little tricks. They do what you want them to do. You can give them a treat. Problem is, Democratic Party has not given Black people any treats. They look us over every time. Everybody else comes before us. Joe Biden said in that meeting with civil rights leaders, now's not the time. Never the time for us. Time for Israel, though. Time to send that $3.8 billion to Israel, though. Won't send no money to the Black communities. Won't invest in building up these communities. Turning over racist practices from banks so that people can get loans for home ownership. Won't do any of that. Because the reality is, and Joe Biden isn't going to say this. Actually, he might because he kind of stumbling. But the reality is, most of these Democrat politicians, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, the rest of them, they won't say this shit out loud, which the reality is they don't really want Black people, too many of us, to do too much better financially because they don't want us in their neighborhoods. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that, but it's the reality. Sure, they'll let a couple, Kamala, come on in. Michelle Obama, Michelle girl, I love you. Come on in. They don't want a lot of us up in that mofo, though. They don't want a lot of us. They'll take 2, maybe 3. Too many of us start moving up in their areas and they'll start moving somewhere else. That's just the reality. We'll continue on here. The coalition of Black clergy, pushing Mr. Biden for a ceasefire is diverse, from conservative-leaning Southern Baptists to more progressive, non-denominational congregations in the Midwest and in the Northeast. This is not a fringe issue. That's coming from Reverend Michael McBride. He's a founder of Black Church PAC and the lead pastor of the Way Church in Berkeley, California. There are many of us who feel that this administration has lost its way on this. Seeing images of destruction in Gaza, many Black voters whose churches have become involved in the ceasefire movement have voiced increasing disenchantment with Democrats who they feel have done little to stop the war because they're all bought and paid for. It goes on to say here, the pastor's Palestinian allies in the United States, Gaza, and the West Bank have sought their assistance on behalf of civilians suffering under Israel's counteroffensive. And the pastors have gotten an earful from their own congregants, especially younger churchgoers, about the conflict and Mr. Biden's full-throated support for Israel. That sentiment more broadly reflects, a strong sense of solidarity between Black Americans and Palestinians that has shaped opinion since the war began. And I'll end here. We see them as part of us, said Reverend Cynthia Hale, the founder and senior pastor of Ray of Hope Christian Church in Decatur, Georgia. They are oppressed people. We are oppressed people, and continuing to vote for the Democratic Party does not change us from being oppressed people. Now, listen to this conversation here from Morning Joe. Listen to, I'm going to start referring to this guy because he reminds me of the character from Coming to America. The guy was like, he said his father owned the Soul Glow. Just let your soul glow. Just let it shine, girl. Just let it glow. Sorry, I can't do that. But that's who he reminds me of. Soul Glow. Yes, Soul Glow. Who was it? Daryl. Thank you, Red. I'm going to start calling him Daryl because homeboy rocking the Jerry curl in 2024. It looked like Jerry curl, right? I didn't know Jerry was still a thing. But anyway, listen to what he says about Biden in South Carolina.
You were at President Biden's Brooklyn Baptist event in South Carolina over the weekend. What stood out to you?
Yeah, I think, I was traveled with the president from here, South Carolina and back. And what was really interesting is kind of the excitement that was with these Black voters, both we went to the barbershop, we went to a lunch event, we went to a church, and obviously this First in the Nation primary dinner that the South Carolina Democrats were having. And there was a lot more excitement. And you can kind of, you've heard from Democrats and us asking the Biden campaign, why do you guys feel so good about the Black vote when we're looking at polls and it's looking a little shaky? These kinds of events are why, right? These kind of events where you're hearing 4 more years chants come up unprompted, where you are hearing a call and response back and forth to what the president was saying when he's.
Let me jump in here for a second and tell you what he's not going to tell you, because he's a White House correspondent, so he's paid to say the right things. Some of those people are paid to show up to those places and chant 4 more years. Let me say it again for the people in the back. Some of those people are paid to show up to the churches and to show up to those barbershops and chant 4 more years. Marcel Dixon was on a couple weeks ago, and he made it very clear, even when Joe Biden was at the church in Charleston, South Carolina, the AME church, Marcel made it very clear, most of the people in that church were not a part of the congregation. These people are paid, okay? Now think about the article that I just read you, and you really believe what this guy's saying? We'll call him Daryl.
Talking about promises made, promises kept, but also you could hear it in the clip you just played, them talking back and forth about Donald Trump and their kind of hate of him. Frankly, when I talked to a lot of the folks there, there was some. Obviously, Dan Phillips was also at that dinner. He went up. There was no one really paying attention to him. So much so, a few times he had to say, "I'm up here. Show me some respect," over and over and over again. And even someone who was sitting at a Dean Phillips table, who was invited by Dean Phillips, said he's for Biden. So it shows you the kind of support that he has there in South Carolina.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. But again, Daryl, he's paid to represent the White House, and he's paid to protect Joe Biden. Just let your soul glow. Just let it shine now. Anyway, that's what's really happening, guys. That's what's really happening out there. Black pastors are not too happy about it. There are always going to be the ones that are going to be Democrat loyalists that'll still come out and support. But like I said, this does not matter so much in reference to South Carolina as you think, because it's a red state. South Carolina is not going to be blue. I don't even think Georgia is going to be blue again. Let's go to some of the comments. Thank you for the super chat, Nancy. You Putin puppet. Who made this? Nancy Insider Trading Pelosi. Thank you, Roger. Sellout sellers. No, we not at church anymore listening to pimps in the pulpit. Oop. Thank you, Old Crow. Honestly, it could just be my circles, but the majority of the church blacks I know are elders. The younger people, to include me, 40s, aren't into it. Yep. Thank you for this as well. Seems to me as if Biden and their DNC aren't trying to get the youth voter. Basically, they want 80-year-olds to vote for each other. There you go. Thank you for the super sticker, John. Thank you for the super chat, Ava, session 7. Bakari sellout, creating caricatures of black folks. Grr. I can't say in, please here. I know. I feel you, Ava. Thank you, Meteor Dreams. Get ready to dust off your church crown, Sabby, JK. Thank you for the super chat, Jojo. Thank you for the work you do, sending good vibes from West Virginia. Thank you, Mark Arrington. Mark Lamont Hill took the black church to task with his last speech. Yes, he did. I know I played part of that on here, but yes, he did. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sparky. But Sabby, you don't need a beauty salon. You're a natural beauty. Oh, that's really sweet, Sparky. Sparky trying to earn bonus points up in here. Thank you, Nero. They need to respect us. Times are changing. They need to respect us. Times are changing. Yes. Yes. And thank you, Coffee Lover. You've earned yourself a subscriber. God bless. Well, thank you so much and welcome.